Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
And Brainbath Jason.
Brainbath Jason, hi.
Hello.
Megan decided that she had to be, a judge this week. Like, that's so important.
Ongoing training for her important job.
Right. She's away at another judgy conference. That's what we're just going to call it, a judgy conference.
It's just teaching her to be more judgy.
Yeah, exactly. And whatever. So she is not joining us this week in the studio, and you can tell we're not bitter about it at all.
Fine. Her Christmas present can just sit here until next week, I guess.
It is, too. It's just sitting on the table teasing me because she just has to be a judge and go do judgy things. We're happy to be here. I'm happy, Brainbath Jason, that you could join me for today's episode.
I am also happy.
Oh, good. Shake the gree-gree. I can't reach it.
Because I get to.
Yes.
Oh,
see, we get to.
Thanks.
The skull.
The skull.
Let's get off to a good start. I got a good one for you today that actually came from a suggestion from Patreon Sarah. The reason that she suggested this case, and she's going to know which Sarah. We have several Patreons.
I was going to say,
Sarah.
do we only have one?
No, definitely not. But this
particular, it's such a unique name.
This particular Sarah will know that this is her case because she requested it because she actually grew up with one of the victims in this case. Yes. And so that victim's name was Lisa, and she really wanted her friend's story to be told. And I just wanted to tell Sarah, thank you for trusting us with your friend's case, and we're very sorry for the loss of her. And as with all of the cases that we cover, we really hope that saying the names of those lost will, somehow it helps keep their spirit alive, help their soul soar, and we just thank you. I think it's very special when people recommend cases to us that they personally knew the victims. That means that they believe that we will do the case justice, that we will be respectful as always, because we're very victim-focused. We'll be respectful to the victim. We don't give a shit about the perpetrators. Yeah, but tragically, there are 3 victims in this case. And this case is most commonly known as the Carmel Murders, named after the quiet Indiana town that this horror takes place in, not far from us. Mm-hmm. I see Brainbath Jason is shaking his head. Mm-hmm. The victims are a sibling set known as Nicholas George Allemenos and Lisa Nicole Allemenos, as well as a friend of the family, Christopher Edward, known as Chris James. So there are 3 victims, and I'm going to start by telling you about them, as we typically like to do. I'm going to start with the youngest victim, 13-year-old Lisa. Lisa was born May 29th, 1980 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Sarah had actually sent us an article that was done on the 1-year anniversary of the murders by the Indianapolis Monthly publication. The author interviewed Bill Baker, one of the victim's teachers who knew all of the victims in this case. What he said of Lisa was that no one speaks of Lisa without mentioning her smile. She literally lit up a room. She was an honor student. She participated in Girl Scouts, track, cross country, and a non-denominational Christian youth group. 3 years before her death, she began taking violin lessons and developed an immediate love affair with the instrument. She would practice half an hour every day after school, despite joint problems that caused her fingers to swell and throb with pain. Mr. Baker actually recalled that while the violin lessons were taking a toll on her, and he could see that because she would actually put ice packs on her hands in his class. She never complained about it. The pain paid off because a month before the murders, Lisa won first place for a violin solo at a regional concert. So she was quite good. And Sarah, in her email, had said that she was always just a really sweet girl. So just want to make sure that all is in here for us to kind of get to know Lisa a little bit. I mean, she was only 13 years old. Her brother Nick was the next youngest in this case at just 17. He was born September 22nd, 1976 in Indianapolis, Indiana. He was also an A student who planned to major in pre-med at Hanover College, and he served on Carmel High School's student council, acted in 2 school plays, and did his own radio show on Carmel's 24-hour FM station. Mr. Baker recalled that Nick was an intense individual. He could be opinionated, but he still remembers the day that Nick walked into his office after reading a book that the teacher had recommended. He actually threw the book at his teacher and said, "This is trash." So he said that he redeemed himself when he placed a copy of Gary Paulson's Easter Sun, Winter Moon into Nick's hands. And he was so entranced in that book that Nick then devoured more than a dozen of the author's other books. And actually, a few months after these tragic murders, that author went to Indianapolis to speak, and he was told about Nick's admiration for his books. And he was so touched that he actually dedicated his next new book, Father Water, Mother Woods, in Nick's memory.
Oh.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
There was another article that was printed on the 25th anniversary of these murders that happened to be published in 2019. And Lisa and Nick's father, George, which, Nick's middle name is George, so that makes sense, spoke about how after 25 years, he gets dream visits from his children. And yes, that is indeed what they are from a spiritual perspective. But he said, quote, "I dream of the kids. When I speak with my kids in the dream, I think that they're touching me as opposed to just seeing them in the dream. It's just a dream, but when I talk to the kids, I feel that they are within me. And that gives me a lot of solace when that happens," end quote. And that's the whole point of having a dream visit from someone on the other side, because it does provide us with solace. My heart breaks for Nick and Lisa's parents, as it's hard enough to go through the loss of one child, let alone 2. The other victim in this case, Chris James, he's the oldest. He was 23 when this happened. And he was born June 13th, 1970, also in Indianapolis, Indiana. According to the Indianapolis Monthly publication that I spoke about before, that was published about a year after the murders, more than anything, Chris James enjoyed fishing trips in Canada that he took each summer with his father and a group of friends. But what's weird is that in these trips, a cloud kind of hung over their 1989 outing because 3 of the oldest members of their group had passed away during the previous year, which I'm assuming, since this is James and his dad, I'd imagine that the group included a lot of older friends of his father that would go on this trip too. So 3 of them had passed away in 1989. So James and a friend climbed into a canoe, paddled to a large rock in the center of the lake, and attached a small brass plaque bearing praise for the 3 men that they usually took on these trips that they had lost that year. The summer after Chris was murdered, his fishing group made it an annual pilgrimage to Canada. But before the first hook hit the water, a couple of the men paddled out to the large rock in the middle of the lake. And this time, in honor of Chris, they added a second plaque directly below the first. And it said, "Sometimes we cry because we miss him, but we will always smile because we knew him." And so Lita James, Chris's mother, said that she can still suddenly become emotionally unglued by certain memories and unexpected reminders. I mean, that's grief for sure. But she said, quote, "I don't think a day goes by that I don't think of him. I try to keep his memory alive. We don't understand why this happened, but I accept that God knows best and he has a reason." End quote. So now that we know a little bit about the victims and just how deeply they were loved, let's talk about the perpetrators of this case, because there's also 3 of those. So we have 3 victims and 3 perpetrators. And I'm trying to really be conscientious in how I'm separating this, because it's a lot of names to go around. So we have Lisa, Nick, and Chris. And Chris's last name is James, which is also the first name of one of the perpetrators. So I am only going to try to use first names so that we don't accidentally get confused between the victims and the perpetrators here, okay? The perpetrators are Raymond Adams, James Walls, Kofi Madabu Ajabu. The 3 actually shouldn't have really been acquainted at all, because Raymond is the oldest, the shithead, and the ringleader at 27, while James was 21 and Kofi was 22. By 27 years old, Raymond Adams was basically a career criminal, and make no qualms about it, he was eventually going to end up in prison for life. His first arrest was at the age of 11. He liked to take things that did not belong to him. He also just liked to have nice things without working for them. As a student at Broad Ripple and North Carolina high schools, he showed a flair for art, but little else. He was described as a social misfit who failed to graduate school because of chronic truancy. He later earned a GED at North Central, and Raymond's adolescent years were rife with misdeeds and conflicts at home, where his mother and stepfather grew weary of his bullshit, okay? Megan would probably have more to say about, from a juvenile perspective, what was going on, right?
I'm sure there's explanations and reasons, but
there is 100%. I mean, his first brush with the law was at 11 years old.
yeah,
We definitely have some childhood issues here that were not necessarily his fault at the beginning.
Well, I'm a presume lack of role models.
Yes, all kinds of things. You're not just born innately, into being a criminal, right? Like that.
Delinquent.
So we can feel sorry for 11-year-old Raymond, okay? But the fact of the matter is, he was involved with the justice system. He was involved with the juvenile justice system. And he, instead of taking those opportunities to learn and grow, he continued to make his life path. If he wasn't wrapping his stepfather's Camaro around a tree, he was getting arrested on charges of burglary, check forgery, credit card fraud. Once, while working as a pizza delivery driver, 2 friends, quote unquote, held him up, like, as in a stick up.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at you, but like, this is a stick up, right?
She's doing finger guns, everybody.
I am, yes. And then what they did, he was fakely robbed by 2 of his friends, and then they just divided the money, the pizza delivery money, amongst the 3 of them, okay? This is a con that he frequently likes to do, so just keep that in mind. At age 19, he left home for good, living with friends and doing odd jobs, mainly as restaurants as like a busboy, and building up his juvenile arrest record. He left home he left home for good because he didn't like rules, but he liked to spin the sob story so that that his family kicked him out so that others would take him in. He then promptly took advantage of these families' generosity by taking their credit cards and making lavish purchases. He once used a stolen credit card to buy $800 worth of bicycles and other fancy bicycle shoes. Truly, his mom and stepfather have been interviewed by the media after all of this came out, and they all say, we did not kick him out. He left at 19 on his own accord because he couldn't follow the house rules, which I'm sure included don't get arrested. Stop stealing stuff. Work for your money.
Quit breaking the law.
Quit breaking the law. That's what our rule is. That's a rule in our house.
Too much to ask.
Yep. Got to follow all the laws inside this house and out, guys.
Get a job.
Yes. And so he would go to his friends' families. He'd make these sob stories, and then he'd rob them. And he would just move from family to family doing that. Raymond was cognitively and emotionally immature throughout his entire life, so it's not surprising that he first started robbing people at a young age. But when he was robbing people or when he would get other people involved, he was always hanging out with much younger children, okay, and getting younger kids to commit crimes with him. Part of this is because he enjoyed the dominance that he had over younger people, but they're also just easier to manipulate and intimidate, and their frontal lobe is even less developed than his, so their impulse control isn't there. And part of it is his emotional immaturity. He could connect with younger people better than he could people his age by the time he reached adulthood and beyond.
Hence hanging out with kids 8 years younger than him.
Yep. When he was at North Central, there was a mix of students from affluent to poor neighborhoods. He saw what some of the wealthy students had, and he wanted those nice things too. A former classmate recalled that Raymond was charismatic. Okay, in high school, he was the class clown, always cutting up at school and partying on the weekends. He'd come walking down the hallway with a big smile on his face, and everyone would say, "Hey, Raymond, what's going on?" But if he had the opportunity, he would steal from his own friends. He was a con man, even in high school. The classmates found out the hard way after giving Raymond a ride to a hotel where he was staying. Also, at this time, because he claimed he was kicked out by his parents. This classmate says, as soon as we pulled up to the hotel, police surrounded the car and arrested both of us, the classmate recalls. It seemed that Raymond had actually been robbing hotel rooms, not actually living there. So this guy, this classmate, who I did not name here, was an accomplice because all the stuff that Raymond had on him did not belong to him. He had been robbing
He's got a niche.
He has a problem.
Yeah.
He has a problem. Yep. Throughout his teens and early 20s, he racked up more and more arrests, mostly for these minor crimes, okay, scams, burglaries. He did briefly land in Marion County Jail and the Indiana Youth Center, but he was still beating the system at the time of his most recent arrest, which is going to be eventually arrested for murder. But even at that time, he had been arrested for writing a bad check at a grocery store. He was out on $1,000 bond and put into a diversion program at the time that he was arrested for these murders. Though people with a long rap sheet don't usually qualify for the diversion programs, Raymond was allowed in because the amount of money that was stolen was small and the store just wanted to recover it, and they did. But by successfully completing the program and 2 years probation, he could have had that arrest off his record. That's what the plan was, had he not been, charged for murder in the middle of all of this.
So something escalated from all these cons, thievery.
Yeah, it's really, yes, something that
homicide.
I want everybody to keep in mind is that we have him as the alleged ringleader here, and we have him as a career criminal. Yeah, he's got a long rap sheet. He really does. But it's for forgery. It's for stealing.
Never anything violent.
No, it's not. And so it's just something to think about as we go through some more of these details. Not to say that somebody can't escalate, because of course we see that they do. But how this all plays out in court becomes is still a really hot topic today for this case. The other two perpetrators, they don't seem like the type that would end up being alleged accomplices to a murder. James Walls had zero previous brushes with the law. There's not a whole lot of background information on him. We do know that he worked at a Little Caesars. He worked at a restaurant called Noble Romans after coming to Indianapolis from Florida. He had actually only recently moved from Florida to Indiana at the time that this all happens. There is a possibility that Raymond's influence may have surfaced even before the murders, because in January, by the way, this case takes place in 1994, okay? But in January, just a couple of months before, James told the police that he was robbed while trying to make a cash deposit for his employer. He worked at Little Caesars and he worked at the Noble Romans restaurant. All right. Now, this story actually mirrors one of Raymond's favorite cons, in which an employee with access to company money claims to have been held up, is robbed by someone, and then they just divide the take amongst everyone, the robbers and the quote unquote victim, right? So they find it very interesting that January 1994, James tells the police he was robbed when he was trying to make this big deposit for one of the restaurants. And then just 2 months later, we find out that him and James are actually friends. Or excuse me, James and Raymond are actually friends. So although James did not have any criminal history, there is a possibility that this incident that took place where he was quote unquote robbed might have actually just been Raymond robbing him for fake. And that might have been his first actual crime, right? Now, Kofi, he didn't have a criminal history either, except there was one arrest a year before these murders for allegedly stealing a gun at a gun show in 1993. However, that incident has been chalked up as a possible misunderstanding, and there were no eventual charges. But Kofi and a witness maintained that he simply picked up a firearm at one of these gun shows and then immediately put it down, but he was accused of trying to steal it. Now, I will tell you, Kofi is black. Could he have been trying to steal it even though he had never done something like that previously? And could it have just been that there was a racial profiling happening and that the person, and I don't know the race of the person who was at that booth at the gun show, but could they have been making some presumptions about Kofi? Absolutely. I don't know. I wasn't there, but it's not on his record. We know he was accused of it. There were witnesses that were there that testified, no, he picked it up and he put it down like he said. He wasn't trying to steal it. And he didn't steal anything. But the other problem with Kofi, and this is what really comes into play in this case, is that Kofi in 1994, when this case took place, well, he's the oldest son of Black Panther militia leader. And that is really a big part. The media that surrounds that puts Kofi in the forefront as a perpetrator in this case. And it's true, when you Google it, his name pops right up, even though it was Raymond that is identified as like the ringleader. And there's a lot of speculation that the reason of this is because there were stereotypes and assumptions made about Kofi simply because his father was a Black Panther militia leader. Okay. So it might also be easy to see why there were some allegations that he might have been trying to steal a gun. Might not have had, whether it's fair or unfair is not what we should be determining here. I'm just telling you that is an aspect to this case and the only other criminal history that Kofi had going into this. Kofi's mom recalls that at age 9, her son was sitting at a pew at the Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church where the preacher's message seemed to move him. To her surprise, at the altar, he walked in front of everybody at the church and told the preacher that he wanted to accept Jesus as his Savior and be baptized. He was well-behaved and pleasant. He was kind of like academically indifferent. He was a really smart kid, and he had a lot of capabilities that teachers felt he didn't use. School wasn't his number one priority, but he was very, very intelligent. His interests were taekwondo. Oh my God.
Do it again.
I can't read it. I have to just say it. Taekwondo, weightlifting. He liked to sketch charcoal pictures. He was an artist of superheroes. He really loved animals. He loved taking care of his pets. He had hamsters, frogs, spiders, lizards, a baby boa, everything. Cavalier attitude in the classroom did concern his parents. They expected him to go to college. And he just kind of felt like, I already know this stuff. He was bored. Is what it sounds like to me is he was bored in school. Because he was articulate and loved to write, he excelled in English and language classes. Science and math, not so much, which doesn't surprise me. It sounds like he had an artistic side of his brain, so that would track. Throughout high school, he maintained a C average, which is something that frustrated his parents. They did expect him to be, a little bit higher up there. But high school as he moved into high school was just something he endured. His parents did not usually agree on how he should be raised. His mother's name is Jane, And she desperately wanted him to remain in the Baptist church. But his father rejected Christianity and became a Muslim in 1975. So they wanted Kofi to, follow that path as well, whereas his mom really wanted him to hang on to his Christian beliefs, which, as I told you, when he was 9 years old, he felt moved by a preacher's sermon and went up and declared Jesus in his heart. And so I think that there's a little bit of contention there.
It's an interesting home.
It is. And his mom and his father separated several times, but their most recent, at the time of this case, they had separated in the summer of 1993. And then this case happens March of 94. Some observers have speculated that Kofi's father's Black Panther rhetoric tainted his attitude toward the murder victims. They were 3 young white residents of an upper-class neighborhood. On a personal level, however, Kofi really had little contact with the Panthers, according to his mom, right? Like he did attend some meetings in his marches, but it was mostly just to please his father. She didn't feel, in her perspective as his mom, that it was tainting him or harming him in any way that would have justified leading him to be an accomplice to a murder. Before he met Raymond Adams, Jane felt that her son Kofi had always made quality friends, but not this time. She said somehow he was charmed by this man. Remember what I said? Raymond was 27. Kofi is 21 at this time, and so more impressionable. But Raymond was good at connecting and manipulating younger people too. But he's still not a child. He's still an adult. And I'm going to include this story only because I think that we're going to continue to see Kofi in the news if you follow this story. And this was something that his mom had told a reporter to show kind of who he was as a person. But basically in July 1993, this would have been, 9 months or so before the murders. But Kofi was driving down the road and he accidentally hit a dog. And instead of just doing a hit and run, he was with the dog holding the dog while it took its last breaths. And then he walked the whole neighborhood with the dog until he could find the owners to let them know, I'm so sorry. I have hit your dog. This is what happened. And here he is. So you can bury him. And so for a lot of, for his family, they're like, how does he go from this to then being an accomplice to murder? And make no mistake, when I'm telling this story, he absolutely was an accomplice to murder. But as we will get to the court proceedings and whether or not he should continue to remain in prison is what puts Kofi at the forefront currently in the news. And that's going to be just something that our listeners are going to have to make their own determination about, because I'm not going to necessarily sit here and say that we have opinion or that I have an opinion.
But there's obviously some characteristics that were not in common with the other.
Yes.
He's not a lifetime delinquent.
Right. And that's really what I
don't think that Raymond ever had any compassion in his life for anything.
Correct. So if he had never learned what compassion was, how was he supposed to extend that to anybody himself? Whereas I don't think that is the situation for the other two. And as a matter of fact, just before the murders, Kofi's father had said, you're going to come live with me. They did not like the influence of Raymond on Kofi, or James for that matter. Okay. And so his dad's literally quoted in a magazine saying, I told him, son, you're flirting with a hurtin', so you're going to come live with me. So he goes and moves in with his father, thinking at this age, like, I don't know if his dad's going to, just set him on the straight and narrow or what. I think they just had hoped it would get him away from these friends, when he had usually gravitated towards good friends, now we've got Raymond and we've got James, and they're sketchy in their opinion, and so they're trying to set him off, on a better path. And quite frankly, he still becomes an accomplice to murder while he's living with his dad. So it did not work. Now, Kofi met James Walls at work in September 1993 because Kofi took a job at the Noble Romans restaurant that I told you James worked at. So he naturally becomes friends with James, who was his coworker. And soon Kofi's just attending parties that James hosted at his apartment. As I told you, James had recently moved from Florida. He actually lived in Coral Gables. And it was just just a little bit in 1990. It was like at the end of 1993 or so. Like he moved. So if they met in September, like he moved that summer. Got a job at Noble Romans and Little Caesars. James Walls worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. All right. So what happens is Kofi and James meet Raymond, the 27-year-old, at a party. Shortly after he moved here, James met Raymond shortly after moving here, and then Kofi met James when working at Noble Romans, all right? They strike up a friendship. They start partying together. They're just going to weekend parties, okay? But then Raymond asks to move in with James at the apartments, and James agreed. They're throwing these apartment parties, nothing like talking backwards.
Yeah.
And that's how Kofi meets Raymond, is because he went to a party that was at James' house and he lives there. Raymond lives there with him. So as Raymond and James are roommates, Kofi is just an acquaintance of Raymond at this point and a coworker of James that they just occasionally hang out and party together on the weekends. Despite his 2 jobs, James fails to pay his rent, falling so far behind that in early 1994, he received an eviction notice. Possibly why that January, if you remember right, I told you in January 1994, James reported to the police that he had been robbed. Okay, we know he got an eviction notice that same month. So that's potentially why he faked, there's a lot of theory that he had set up and faked that being robbed, and it was just money that he stole.
Yeah, that math's not mathin'.
Right. Money that he stole to try to pay his rent. And what is really interesting, to give you some more insight into Raymond, is that Raymond had no business to be living in that apartment in the first place. He wasn't on the lease. James was just letting him live there. Raymond called the landlord and chewed him out for the eviction notice, even though you're not paying your rent. And dude, who the hell are you?
Right.
You don't live here. But that's the mentality that of Raymond, okay?
Yeah, he's just a guy on the couch.
For sure, yep. So Raymond starts looking for a way to raise money, to get enough money for a house. He doesn't just want to pay for his apartment. He just wants to be done with the whole renting thing and dealing with landlords to begin with. And on March 15th, 1994, he thinks he's found it. Because March 15th, 94, a mutual friend introduced Raymond to Nick Allemenos at Nick's home. During his 30-minute visit, Raymond sold Nick some marijuana. All right? Raymond learned that Nick's father, George, was golfing in the Caribbean, leaving Nick home with his sister, Lisa, and his friend, Chris, who also lived there. The next evening, Raymond wanted to return because Nick actually had a bike for sale. And so Raymond's like, hey, I'll come back tomorrow. I've got a friend that's looking for a bike. I'm going to bring my friend. You can show him the bike and maybe he'll buy it. So Nick's like, cool. Yeah, let's do that. So he agreed. But Nick was worried that Raymond was dangerous because when Raymond was selling him the marijuana and had met him for the first time, he actually flashed a 10-inch knife that he called his right-hand man. We know this because later Nick's girlfriend, Karen Kennelly, tells the police that And I'll get to how that all comes out. But that knife made Nick uncomfortable. It also made Chris, who lives in Nick and Lisa's home, it made him uncomfortable too. So uncomfortable that he put a .32 caliber revolver in his pants before Raymond was to come back over on March 16th to look at that bike, because he had the correct intuition that Raymond was possibly dangerous. But he never got to use that gun to defend himself. So that night on March 16th, 1994, Raymond, James, and Kofi arrive just before midnight, and they get right to work. Just for ease of understanding, I will tell you now that Kofi maintains that he thought they were going to a party. James thinks that they're just going to rob the people, which is usually Raymond's MO. All right? By their own admission, because remember, we don't have any survivors in this case. So we only have admissions from Kofi and James and Raymond as to what happened from this point on when they arrived just before midnight on March 16th. James and Kofi said that they bound and gagged Nick with duct tape, while Raymond did the same to Chris and Lisa. Then James and Kofi said suddenly Raymond just slashed all three victims' throat with that black knife that he called his right-hand man. What should have been a simple robbery turned into a triple homicide. We don't know. What happened? How did this happen? Because the truth is, the only people left to tell the story are the three people that are the perpetrators. There's question as to why Raymond, who until this had been a small-time con man, would turn into being a murderer. The police suggest that this could show his criminal escalation because during many robberies, he not only grabbed the cash, but he also left behind unnecessary destruction, basically just destroying things that he couldn't steal just to be malicious. Which reminds me of the wet bandits on Home Alone, like Marv and Harry.
He leaves the sink running.
Yeah.
Just to be a dick.
Exactly. I think that the fury that he directed towards inanimate objects suddenly found a new target. These three nice-looking, popular, well-to-do young people who seemed to have everything and he didn't. That's a possibility. That's a theory. That's a possibility.
It's a very very gruesome murder for your first time.
It is. And also, remember that revolver, that gun that I told you about? He wrestled that away from Chris. So he truly could have distanced himself a bit and still murdered them with a gun, but he didn't.
Yeah.
He chose to use this knife and be up close and personal and slash all three of their throats brutally. And it's a bit perplexing. It really is. James and Kofi claim they had no idea that Raymond planned to murder anybody. And James admits, I knew we were going to rob them, and maybe rough up Chris James if necessary, because he was the oldest, right? Remember Nick was only 17, Lisa was only 13. So Chris was the oldest, and they figured, he might have put up a fight. We might have to rough him up, but we're going to steal all this stuff that we can. Chris was actually the reason he was living at the home. He needed a place to live. He was the assistant manager at George's, remember that's Lisa and Nick's dad, at his hardware store that he owned. So Raymond assumed that Chris would know the store's safe combination and alarm code. So that was how they were going to steal enough money to buy a house, was they were going to go to this home, they were going to rob these three people because George was out of town. They were going to rob the home. Then they were going to take Chris James down to the hardware store, get the combination, get all the money out of the hardware store, and that was going to be the con. That was going to be it. So they figured we might have to rough Chris up a bit to get what we want. But instead, none of that happened. Possibly because Chris pulled out a gun, right? And so maybe that's where plans went awry and it wasn't just a simple robbery. I don't know. But these three shitheads have spent so much time trying to just blame one another that we'll never know the truth, which is often the case when we cover these multiple perpetrator, he said, she said type cases. According to testimony, neither Kofi nor James behaved like horrified spectators. James, by the way, was not a small man. He was 6 feet tall, 230. And he said when he saw Raymond thrust his knee into Chris's back and then grab him, like he put his knee into his back and then grabbed Chris's chin and pulled it backwards in an attempt to break his back, he said, he told the police, he just left the room so he wouldn't have to watch. Okay, that's not someone who's horrified by what they're seeing. And so the police are collecting this information of what did you see and how did you respond? And that's how they made the determination that neither one of you seemed to have a problem with the way these things were escalating. And later, when Chris was bleeding to death on the floor, neither one of them did anything to help. And actually, Chris claims that Kofi had made fun of the sound that it made after one of the victims was essentially choking and gurgling and whatnot after their throat had been slashed. I don't know which victim. And that was just by James's admission, okay? And that's a point that Kofi's family heavily rejects, saying he doesn't go from being somebody who carried a dead dog that he had accidentally hit to find their owners to then making fun of how someone sounds when they're drowning on their own blood. So maybe it didn't happen. But what we do know is he certainly didn't try to save anybody. He certainly didn't run to the police after this happened, okay? Both James and Kofi admit that they carried electronic equipment and other belongings from the home and loaded it into James Wall's Honda, and also into George's 92 BMW and Nick's 1990 Audi. And they claim that they were doing that when Raymond was inside the house slashing victims' throats. Okay, so essentially, they're stealing stuff. They come in, they see he has done all of this, and then they did nothing. Whatever his intentions, Kofi missed several opportunities to distance himself from the murders and perhaps even prevent them. At one point, James said that Raymond disarmed Chris in the home with that gun. He tossed the revolver to Kofi and told him to hold it. And so at that point in time, Kofi has a gun.
Yeah, Kofi's holding all the cards if he wants to do something to change the situation.
Sure could. He could have shot, not even shot to kill, but he could have shot Raymond to incapacitate him enough to call the police, and he didn't. Even if they felt intimidated by him, neither can claim that they didn't have an opportunity to escape his influence. So the three of them left the residence in separate cars because remember, James, they arrived in James' Honda. So James leaves with his Honda. The other two stole the Audi and the BMW. They abandoned the Audi in Marion County, and then they took the BMW to Chicago, where they pawned some stolen property. Then they caught a bus back to Indianapolis and returned to the same apartment that James was being evicted from. Hours later, Karen Kennelly, Nick's girlfriend, was concerned that Nick hadn't picked her up for school, the next morning. She goes to the house, enters, and finds the bodies. Poor 17-year-old Karen. I mean, this is just horrible. She ran from the house. She was screaming. She fell to her knees. Nick's dead. They're all dead. And that's how neighbors found her, screaming. They get the police. Of course, it doesn't take the police long to track down the three perpetrators because Karen had been talking with Nick. Remember, Nick met Raymond the night before this happened buying marijuana. He felt uneasy by Raymond. He told Karen he's going to come back tomorrow and bring a friend to look at this bike that I have for sale. So it's not hard for them to track him down. About 26 hours after the killings, at 4 a.m. on March 18th, police arrived at the apartment. They arrest the three men, and they take them to the Hamilton County Jail in Noblesville, Indiana. They're all charged with robbery and murder. Kofi's defense was that he did not kill anyone. He thought that he was going to a party, and he only stole the items from the house because he was threatened by Raymond that he would kill him if he didn't help him steal and pawn the items. Kofi would ask his parents later, when they were visiting him when he was being held without bond, "Why am I still here? I didn't hurt anyone." What Kofi didn't understand is that by Indiana law, in terms of punishment, it does not make a distinction between the actual murderer and if you're an accomplice to it. It is, you are equally culpable. And we have heard Judge Megan say that several times on this podcast. Therefore, all three of them could be executed for this as their sentence. At this time, Indiana had the death penalty. So Kofi told the police, "Raymond Adams pulled a gun on me, and it was my expectation that I would die as well." That contradicts some things here. We know that Raymond liked to have a knife. We know that he used that knife to kill the victims. And according to James Walls, Raymond actually gave the knife or the gun to Kofi. So to me, that doesn't track. They're all tried separately. To avoid the death penalty, Raymond Adams, he pleads guilty to 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of criminal confinement, 3 counts of robbery, and 1 count of burglary to just full on avoid the death penalty. Okay? He took that plea. So he is sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
First smart thing he's done in his life.
Right. I told you. I think he was destined to end up in prison for life no matter what. All said, that's said and done. Kofi and James were convicted of 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of criminal confinement, 3 counts of robbery, and 1 count of burglary. They also got life without the possibility of parole. Kofi was offered a plea deal. All right? And this is why he's coming up so much in the news now, is because he was offered a plea deal that he refused to take because it would require him to admit to murders that he didn't commit. He was not willing to, by admission, say that he murdered these people, because in his mind, a murderer is someone who actually slit the throats. It's not in the eyes of the law, but for him, his moral compass is that I did not kill these people, so I am not going to take this plea deal. And I know that that means the death penalty stays on as a possibility, but I'm going to go through this trial. That also means that it's possible that if he had taken the plea deal, he would be out by now. The sentencing that he may have received could have been less than life without the possibility of parole. So what happens, Kofi and James, they, as I told you, they both go through a jury trial. They are found by the eyes of the law because that's Indiana law. The jury didn't get it wrong. That's Indiana law. You were an accomplice to murder. So now the sentence is the same. Kofi was eventually resentenced at one point, and instead of getting life, he got 240 years.
Oh, okay.
Right. He has appealed and appealed and appealed and appealed, and he's lost all appeals. And what the public's general problem is now with the case is that once you get all this information that I've already given you, and you understand that in the eyes of the law, he was just as culpable, right, as Raymond, who readily took a plea deal and admitted to murdering these people. But Kofi getting life without the possibility of parole, and then resentenced to 240 years, well, that hasn't been sitting well with people. They feel that because of the fact that he wasn't willing to take the plea deal that would require him to admit to murders that he didn't do, that's unfair in, the way the laws are written. And so he should be offered another sentence. And he was resentenced to 240, which is still the same thing.
Unless you've got the magic wardrobe to Narnia, you're going to die in prison.
Right. And he has exhausted his appeals. So at this point in time, his last opportunity, and this is where he's taken it, because he's done 31 years of his life sentence, 3 decades, which some people feel is enough for someone who simply thought they were going to a party, ended up robbing people, and somebody else ended up murdering people during that robbery. They feel that 31 years is a sufficient enough sentence. So he is now on his only last hope, which is in January 2025. He asked for clemency from the governor of Indiana, and a petition was circulated that had enough signatures. At this point in time, I know that it has more than 7,000 signatures, essentially saying you've served 3 decades of your 240-year life sentence, and that's enough. And so there are people out there that are really fighting for Kofi and would like to see him released. Again, I'm not here to impose opinion. I'm just giving you the facts of what's going on. I will say this because I found it, and so I think I would be remiss to leave it out. Kofi hasn't been a perfect prisoner. In 2006, he did attack a prison guard that he had a beef with, and it was pretty gruesome. He attacked a 56-year-old guard at the Pendleton Correctional Facility on June 18th, 2006, as inmates were leaving their cells to go to dinner. He hit the guard with a device believed to be in a lock in a socket. He knocked him unconscious, and then he stomped on him. The guard had a broken collarbone, a broken eye socket, a broken jaw, and brain fluid leaking out of his ears. Police believe that Kofi had been holding a grudge against the guard. He had worked at Pendleton for 25 years. I don't have any information about this guard. I don't know if this guard had taunted him. I don't know. Sounds like there was maybe some issues.
There's 2 sides to that coin.
There is.
I mean,
there absolutely is.
He may not, after serving or being in prison for 10 years.
Yeah, so 94 to 2006.
12 years, that can do some stuff to a person.
Oh, it changes you. Mm-hmm.
However,
absolutely, it changes you. Yep. But he's still a prison
guard, and he almost killed him.
Yeah, and there's a way
to say he's not a violent person is not true.
Yes.
Was he when he went in? Feasibly?
Yeah. He may not have been when he went into prison. Yeah. Prison certainly is going to change you, especially when you're in there for life, right? And you've got essentially nothing to lose. And
you're associated with the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
That gets out. It does. I'm sure it wasn't a pleasant 12 years for
Absolutely
Kofi.
Not. Absolutely not. I'm sure these past 31 years have not been pleasant for him. Rightfully so.
I have opinions about laws, sentencing, varying from state to state that I don't necessarily agree with.
Absolutely.
Like I know Megan's explained it to us, and she's not here to help us today, but she's off doing judge stuff.
Because she's being judgy at a judgy conference.
That whole, I know if you commit a felony and someone dies during the act of that felony, you're responsible for their death, which would be, in a lot of states, some form of manslaughter, which, again, is not the same as triple homicide.
No.
Which,
again, it's not the same as intentional murder, right?
Right. So if that, hypothetically, if that crime had happened in, I don't know state to state, but let's just say one that took that as a crime or a sentencing or charge or whatever.
Yeah.
He'd probably been out by now.
He'd be out. There's a lot of theory that if he had taken the plea deal and had just admitted to murders that he didn't commit, he'd be out by now. Because his sentence might have been different.
The philosophy and psychology behind someone maintaining their innocence to the point where they could be facing the death penalty, to me, I think that says a lot.
Oh, look at Raymond. Raymond knows he killed these people.
Right.
So he was like, a plea deal
caught.
to get...
He's like, I guess I'll just stay alive as long as possible because I'm screwed.
Right.
So he knew. He did that. He killed those people.
So he's like, yes, I will. I'm going to plead guilty to this because you're going to take the death penalty off the table. Great. I'll stay alive. Let me do that. Whereas Kofi's like, no.
Yeah. Whether Kofi knew what was going to happen when he got in the guy's car that night.
Right.
I don't know. We don't know. We can't
We don't know.
Guess.
Yep.
But did he commit a crime? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did he willingly commit crime? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did people die? Yep.
Did he do the right thing afterwards?
No.
Nope.
Could he have changed the outcome of that? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just it.
Again,
so are the 31 years sufficient enough for the crimes he did actually commit? And I think that's the moral conundrum that people are finding themselves in today in 2005. Even a foreman of the jury in Kofi's case, the head foreman of the jury, the head foreman. That's what a foreman is, just so you know.
They're the head of the jury.
So
redundant.
Apologies for my redundancy.
Redundancy again.
My gosh, I know. But he's actually helping to champion the cause for clemency for Kofi, because although per the law, he was rightfully found guilty, supporters of Kofi feel that his sentence is too harsh for someone who didn't actually commit the murder. So you will see he is the foreman on the jury of Kofi's case will absolutely say, he said, and I quote, "I never believed that Kofi killed anybody." And he actually recently said this, October 27th, 2025, in a press release. He said, "We were bound by the way the law was written, but I have carried the weight of that decision for 30 years. I believe in justice, and I believe Kofi deserves mercy." In October 2025, Governor Eric Holcomb deferred the decision to grant clemency at this time for him. What this means really is just that a decision's not been made. Okay? So it's still a possibility. We may, if you follow this case, you may see his name later where it says, hey, clemency was granted, but that's really his last option at this point in time. And the reason why it's gained over 7,000 signatures on the petition is because people agree, the way the law was written at the time, it needed to be changed. His sentence should be changed. So that's that piece.
Do we know if laws have changed in Indiana that would make things different today?
Yes. My understanding is yes, and that's why they're going for the clemency. Not in just in the sentencing phase, not so much in the, if you're an accomplice, you're still an accomplice, right?
He's not being absolved of his crimes.
No. This isn't something like that.
This
will
always clean.
That's what I was gonna say. It's always gonna stay on his record. Mm-hmm.
But the debate of is 30 years sentencing for someone who, by all means, one man admitted to killing 3 people. Mm-hmm. So you have the person who committed the act. Not the crimes, but the act. Yep. Is 30 years enough for someone who happened to be there and didn't do anything to stop it?
Well, and what I was most interested in is, what do the victim's family in this case
Yeah, I'd
feel?
love to hear what they have to say.
I do. I actually even have some extra little just nuggets that you wouldn't ordinarily know if you didn't research heavily this case. But Nick and Lisa's father, George, actually shares a birthday with one of the private detectives that was hired by the defense. So it seems like, wow, how would he know that? This man's name is Bill McAllister. And what is interesting is that the two became friends during the trial. So he's a private investigator. He was hired by the defense during one of the trials. And they became such good friends that they actually talk several times a week. They share meals together, and they always get together on their shared birthday. The reason for this is Bill McAllister said that George is someone who could not have been more pleasant if you'd been related to him. Okay? He says even their first encounter, they were like instant friends, and he was really shocked by that because he was hired by the defense. This man had lost his son and his daughter, and he's being kind to the private investigator that is trying essentially to get these perpetrators off, although it's not the main. The only defense in here are James and Kofi's. Raymond is a non-issue. He pled guilty. So I can kind of see from George's perspective why, although they were involved, I don't need to hate this guy. He's not trying to get the murderer.
I can wrap my head around the empathy because there's already closure.
Yes.
I mean, I can wrap my head around that.
Yep.
Being in that man's shoes.
And George just, said of his relationship with McAllister is like, the thing is that good things can come out of tragic situations. And so I wanted to kind of highlight that a little bit. George talked about how he did eventually move to Colorado because he was chasing a dream. And I think also just to kind of get away from Indianapolis, right? But he ended up returning to Indianapolis. The hardware store that he owned, it closed in 2003 because Lowe's opened nearby and basically crushed him like a bug. Those are his exact words. Yep. So he's retired now, and he splits his time between his Westfield, Indiana home and Florida. So he's a snowbird. And by all, and he dreams, he gets dream visits from his children, even 31 years later. Lita James, she actually lives, now that's Chris James' mom. She lives in a senior living community in Indianapolis, excuse me. And although devastated by the murder of her son, she said she considers that it was a blessing that occurred in Hamilton County because of the support that she received from the investigators and the community throughout the whole ordeal. So I think for her, she's like, if this was going to happen to me and to my son, at least it happened in a supportive community because that's what got me through. She said this whole thing brought out so much good in people. And I still have a whole stack full of cards that we received. While it was a horrible, horrible thing, we also saw the good side of people. George said that he believes that the governor of Indiana will reject clemency for Kofi and that he and his co-defendants are right where they belong. So that answers the question in terms of Nick and Lisa's dad. I couldn't find any information on their mom. I don't know if she just preferred to stay out of the spotlight. It felt to me, with the way that I couldn't find information about her, that either she had passed away, I don't know that, or that she preferred to remain out of the media, and so I'm okay with not having any information to talk about her for, but because George was the one that was in the media talking. George said, listen, of Kofi, he can't kiss his mother. He can't come and go and watch TV when he wants to, and that's fine. I don't want life to be easy for those three. I want them to have to think about what they did. So there, I get it. Lita James, Chris's mom, said she also hopes that the governor won't give Kofi a second chance at freedom, but personally, she's hoping to one day be able to forgive him and his co-defendants. She said, I've always thought that bad feelings and the lack of forgiveness are bad for you. So I have not carried the anger and so forth with me. I just refuse to do that. I'm not angry with them. However, my constant prayer to God is for me to be able to forgive them. In my heart, I still can't. So that answers that question on where the victim's family feel in terms of Kofi's clemency. He did write the families. And although there is a little bit of empathy, I have mixed feelings, and I'm going to read snippets of it for you, because I still think there's a different way he could have worded this, but that's just my opinion. He said, quote, I am so sorry this happened to you, although I'm not the person who actually did it. I should never have been there. I was misled, and that's not a good excuse. If nothing else, the fault is mine because I didn't limit my associations, and I'd like to say I'm so sorry. End quote. So for me personally, it does appear like he is trying to apologize. And I like where he was saying, if nothing else, the fault is mine because I didn't limit. I could have done without although I'm not the person who actually did it. Like, you're not. They know that. They understand the score here. But you also didn't do anything to try to prevent it. You also didn't then go to the police. There were crimes that you committed afterwards. And so I could have done without that part in terms of a little bit of lack of accountability. But again, just me.
I wonder what would have happened to Kofi if that morning he had gone to the police and said, I was involved in a crime. Mm-hmm. These 3 kids were murdered. I can tell you who did it.
I think
what
that
kind
that
of
might have been
sentencing
different.
or what punishment he would have gotten.
Yeah. I think that this might have went to a totally different way for him, very possibly. The private detective that was actually hired by the defense, McAllister, who shares the birthday with George, he said, and he lives in Pendleton, he still works as a private investigator, and he says, you know what? For me, an apology is not enough. If the governor is dumb enough to give him clemency, then there is no justice in Indiana. And I mean, I definitely get that opinion too. This one is a bit of a moral conundrum here in some regards, not in all. I always tend to try to side with the victims' families in cases like this. I can see why there's 7,000 signatures on something that maybe people don't fully understand too. I can see why there was some wanting for laws to be rewritten to a point, but I do also think that there were, and I recognize he was young, but there were crimes that were committed after these murders too, and chances and opportunities that weren't seized upon. So there's that.
I do, back to our whole legal system from state to state. I do feel that if something changes while you're incarcerated that would have changed your sentencing now and then, I think there needs to be some middle ground to modify that or reconsider. I mean, again, depending on the crimes, but this is obviously a prime example.
It is. It really is. I think, and don't quote me here, but I think that's how he ended up with his 240 years, which is still the same as life. He's still not free.
And he's not eligible for parole.
Right. Right. I mean, that's a big one that could be, potentially.
I don't know that if I, again, being Kofi, if you're like, can we reconsider my life sentencing? Sure. 240 years. If you live to be 300, you'll have a couple of good years left.
Yeah. No, I know. I agree. If you're Kofi, that's really shitty.
Not to sympathize a criminal, but that's a kick in the dick.
It is.
Just be like, guess what? Nope. Sorry.
Right. Like, sure, find a way to live to 240 years. Yeah. I know. It was just Sarah. Thank you for this case.
Yeah,
because
excellent,
this was a very good one to cover. Thank you for helping us keep your friend's memory alive, and may they all rest in peace. And I
have several friends from Indianapolis that I wonder if they're familiar with this. I'll have to ask.
Oh, I'm sure it was. She said it was very, very popular at the time. Small town. The biggest part about this was a very, very well-to-do. I mean, I think I told you the 17-year-old had an Audi.
Right.
You guys, Dad drove a BMW. This was a very well-to-do neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Yep. So.
All I know is that's like north side of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you.
Yep. But that's part of the reason why it was so shocking to everybody. But yeah, so thank you, Sarah. Are you ready for a brain bath now?
Sure.
Okay, let me find one for you. This one, I am sure so many of our listeners have seen this in their news feed. But for anyone who might not be a listener in America or might be living under a rock, I'm going to tell us about the raccoon that broke into a liquor store. Did you see this?
I think you sent it to me.
Did I?
This sounds familiar.
You guys, you have to look up.
Or we were talking about it the other night.
You have to look the photos up. But the title is, oops, I started to play an ad. Sorry about that. Heavily intoxicated raccoon passes out in liquor store bathroom after breaking in and ransacking the shelves. And you guys...
And you think this is real?
There's
a real article. Is in
I put it into Snopes.
Okay.
Yeah, I put it into Snopes.
I'm just kind of surprised that a raccoon would get into liquor. Like, I know they'll eat anything, but like...
I actually think what happened was that he broke the liquor. Like, he freaked out. And you can see, and there is video, like he was freaking out, like all anxiety ridden, and simultaneously breaking this alcohol and then ingesting it. Okay. And so,
but he didn't like twist the cap.
No.
I mean, they have thumbs.
And what is the thing is that this poor thing, it's just like a human. He's passed out face down between the trash and the toilet in the bathroom because, quite frankly, he had nowhere else to go. But it's just like a frickin' frat boy on a bad Saturday night.
Oh, I feel you, buddy.
Right. Like, we've all been there. Dirty fucking bathroom floor.
So just close to both the toilet and the garbage can. You can't just pick one.
Exactly.
Because you might need them both.
And look at the way... You might.
Like,
you do need them
he's
both.
like totally face down spread eagle with his little feet sticking out.
He is.
Oh, this is bad.
And even this bathroom, look at how the tile is all yellow where the humans walk, and then it's white by the wall.
I mean,
like
he's a raccoon.
that's so real. That's so real, in that regard. But so the article says animal control officers in Virginia responded to an unusual call this weekend after a raccoon broke into a liquor store, ransacked several shelves, and passed out in the bathroom. On Saturday, officers with the Hanover County Animal Protection and Shelter were called to the Ashland ABC store, which here, just so you guys know, ABCs are some liquor. Yeah. It's a liquor chain, and found the raccoon unconscious in the store's restroom. The raccoon had damaged merchandise on several shelves and got into the liquor before passing out in the restroom. Officers safely secured the very intoxicated raccoon and took it to an animal shelter to recover. After several hours of raccoon...
They put him in a drunk tank.
They did! A little raccoon drunk tank. Ooh, with all the other... there's like a possum with a tattoo in there.
Yeah. Ferret strung out on meth.
Yes. After several hours of rest, the raccoon showed no signs of being hurt, other than maybe a hangover and poor life choices, the shelter said, and it was released back into the wild. Officials said the raccoon broke into the store through the ceiling and damaged the store's security system in the process, triggering a power outage alert from the security company. The store said the animal damaged $250 worth of alcohol. When you see the video from that, like it truly was just like jumping and like then scared, like it's scaring itself as stuff is breaking. The ceiling? Yeah, he fell through the ceiling, and then was on the shelves. Stuff was breaking, and you're just freaking out and accidentally
didn't even know how he got in there. He's trying to pull a Die Hard going through the vents and fucking falls through and crashes in the bourbon. He's like, holy shit. Oh, shit. Like, wait, this tastes good.
But just this picture is just like, oh my gosh, it's so relatable if you've ever been drunk in a public restroom, which I actually never have. But I've dealt with friends. I've helped friends that have been in a public restroom looking like this.
I've broken bottles and tried to salvage what was...
That's true. Yes.
That's happened.
Yes, exactly. So he's better now, and Drunky the raccoon, he's going to think twice before he breaks into any liquor stores. He probably does have this mundane name.
Oh, but you're probably too young to know the movie's Arthur, though.
What?
They're like the early 80s, but the drunk millionaire.
Oh, yeah, no, I am too young.
Okay, sorry.
For that.
Anyway, anyone over 45.
I thought you were making a joke about, a mundane, like, oh yeah, like Arthur the raccoon had a wild night away from the wife and kids.
Oh, I just aged myself.
Ended up in the animal shelter drunk tank with all the other hardened creatures. Yeah. God. Oh, all right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We hope that you keep it curious. Oh, and actually, happy holidays.
Oh, yeah.
I think this one was probably scheduled to release before. Probably scheduled. I'm the one that schedules these.
I don't know. Maybe we should ask whoever's in charge of that shit.
That would be me. Yes. So happy holidays. We're going to go on a little Christmas break, but we'll still be releasing some things for you. And, just be safe. Be very, very safe out there. Don't break into liquor stores, scare yourself, and accidentally get drunk and pass out by the toilet.
Do that at home.
Yeah. Not in public. But, all right. We hope you keep... let's try it again. All right? I'm usually a one-take oneer. Oh, my God.
Holy
What's happened? We have slid off the cracker.
Smile. Stick your tongue out. Smile.
Okay. We hope that you keep it curious.
Keep listening.
Until next time. Bye-bye.
Jingle bells.
Did you say tinkle bells or dingle bells?
I said jingle, but I got a tinkle.
All right.